Yeah, look, I haven't. So just to answer the first part of your
Yeah,
question, I was over in the States when COVID hit.
yeah,
I was going to do a job over there and then it fell through. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just stay for a month or so longer and see if something else comes up. And then COVID hit and I decided just to come straight home, which I'm lucky I did because our borders closed a week later.
okay,
So everything kind of came to a halt. So there were a couple of projects that I think got special COVID passes here in Australia that were able to get up and going during the lockdowns and when everything was kind of shut down here. But I didn't get on any of those. So it really was a couple of years of, yeah, quite difficult. And then I would say since sort of last year, 2022, to me, it started to pick up. It was fantastic. I did like a stage show. I did a film and yeah, just things started to really pick up and it's been looking really promising this year as well. And then we've just had the strikes. So I don't know. At the moment, of course, there's still projects in Australia that are not under the SAG after the SAG agreements.
okay.
So it's all WGA agreements. So it's okay for us to go ahead with those. I think, though, to be honest, the world had just opened up because of the pandemic, where American producers and networks were really looking at doing a lot of content in Australia.
Yeah.
And so it's a real shame that that's kind of now gone to a halt. Yeah, so we are feeling it. I think we're just sort of waiting to see what happens in the next couple of months.
Cassie, we'll go back right to the start and tell me what was the household for Cassie Howarth growing up? Where you come from a middle class family, a wealthy sort of background. What was there any sort of hidden acting talents in terms of your father, your mother? Was there any
Um,
sort
I,
of background in it?
I'd say so. I came from like a middle class background. My dad worked in the mines, and my mum worked at the Sydney Dance Company. So my mum's side of the family is very artistic. Both my grandparents were musicians. Mum was a dancer and a figure skater. So I guess it was in my blood. I grew up dancing, doing ballet. And I went into acting in my 20s when I actually moved to New York with a dance scholarship for musical theatre over there. And then when that fell through, well, it fell through because I injured my back. So I got too badly injured to keep going. And I started dropping into acting classes, and that's how it sort of progressed. But growing up, I grew up on a farm in Australia, in a
Okay.
coastal, on our east coast. I have two brothers. We grew up with cows and dogs and horses and, you know, very average. Like, it was a wonderful upbringing. Like, I loved it, but very far away from, I guess, Hollywood or anything like to do with acting or the entertainment industry. So to me, it was when I moved to Sydney, that was already quite a big step. But then I really wanted to get after it. So I moved to New York to do a lot of training.
So did you have the Marilyn Monroe dreams, dare I say, as a 13, 14-year-old girl in terms of the big lights, the city lights?
No, see, it didn't really hit me until I was in my 20s. Like, I did it at
Yeah.
school. I always enjoyed it. I just didn't really think. I mean, as I said, my dad, my parents are working class. They never really, it wasn't really seen as something you could do as a career. So it was only when I started to get work into it that I thought, oh, okay, you can make money from this. But that really didn't hit until my 20s. I went to University of Sydney and did a combined science and arts degree before I even pursued the dance scholarship overseas. So to me, it hit me later. It wasn't something in my teens. I guess I always loved it. I loved going to the movies. My parents are big into watching films. Every night we would watch movies. So it was I guess it was a part of my upbringing. It just wasn't really, to me, a feasible career.
Yeah. So, Cassie, you were really the studious type growing up in terms of achieving a college education. You had all your college education achieved before you went into acting. So there was never that sort of wild child within you. You had maybe had your heart set on maybe a sort of a normal 9 to 5 sort of job in science or medicine or.
Yeah, I think I didn't know exactly what I wanted. So I did the sciences in case I wanted to go into medicine or health. But then I also loved writing and English literature. And so I did that as well. So I sort of just did, it was the combined degree because I guess I didn't have a really fixed idea of what I wanted.
And I suppose, Cassie, this pursuit of dancing, in terms of being a professional dancer, was that more of a first love for you over acting? And how serious did that get for you? Were we talking about Broadway dancing? Were we talking about Vegas dancing? What sort of levels were we talking about here now?
Yeah, so I grew up doing ballet, and then when I was at uni and I left school, I started to go into more theatre jazz, so musical theatre training. And that's when I did a course here with the wonderful Leslie Bell. She's a fantastic musical theatre teacher here, and that was connected with the Broadway Dance Centre in New York City. And so I got a 3-month scholarship over there to work with them. So I decided to go over there and see if I could, and start auditioning for Broadway musicals. So quite quickly, I was probably there a year or so when I started to get some serious injuries that had been there in my teen years, but then they really flared up when I was sort of dancing hours a day. But yeah, I guess I didn't really have a career in it, but I did pursue it for a while.
And I suppose, Cassie, one thing that I did my research, if this is correct, your first acting jobs, did they come over in New York rather than Australia? Did you have one or two acting jobs? Was your first break into the acting industry coming over in New York rather than Australia?
Yeah, so when I was over there, once I got injured, I started to take some more acting classes and joined some theatre groups. And then I was lucky enough to get on a TV show over there. So it was called Bar Karma, and it was about a time traveling bar. It was like a science fiction show.
Yeah.
And I was the bartender. So that was my first professional gig outside of the theatre. But I will say, when I was at university in Sydney, the Wiggles, I don't know if you've heard of them. Have you
It's
heard
a
of the Wiggles?
cartoon sort of thing, is it? It's a famous cartoon
Well,
sort of show.
it's for children. It's not a cartoon.
Okay.
It's for there. It started in Australia, but now it is worldwide. But basically, they're like musicians. It's like a children's educational program, but it's also
Yeah.
really fun. Kids love it. They had a spin-off of this afternoon program called Kingdom of Paramithi, and I was the music box dancer in that, who also used to kind of, come in and host the show and introduce
Yeah.
things. And so I guess if I look back at it, that was kind of my first
Okay.
professional gig. But I don't know if you could call it acting. I guess it was more dance. So the first, professional acting job was in New York. It was on that TV show, Bar Karma.
And had you your heart set when you were out in New York in 2016, once you made the break into the acting industry, or maybe staying there, maybe pitching up in New York, and then maybe moving to the West Coast and Los Angeles and sort of, was that the initial plan, dare I say, at first?
No, the initial plan was just to go for the 3 months for the scholarship. I honestly went there with no money. I stayed at it was like a Volunteers of America female, like a home for
Yeah.
women to go over there, and it was like studio apartments, and it was really cheap, and they fed you. And so I really just decided to go there and just, do the 3 month scholarship and do some auditions in dance and see how it went. But I just fell in love with the city, and I loved the theatre scene, and I loved all the arts there, and I met some great people, wonderful people, and doors started opening, and I just started to really hone in on training really hard. And before I knew it, it was sort of, 2.5 years later, I'd been able to luckily from my degree, I was able to get a visa there.
Yeah.
And then, things just started to roll, doors started to open. And I just worked really hard. So I
And
ended up staying for about nearly 4 years.
yeah, and did you, obviously at that time, did you get yourself a talent agent? Did you get yourself all those sort of representation? Was that an easy or a tough decision for you at the time in terms of finding the right people to represent you?
Do you know, I look back on it now and I think it was pretty crazy, but I used to just turn up on their doorsteps, like in their apartment buildings, with not their home, but their office buildings. Sorry, not their apartment buildings, their office buildings. I'd turn up with my headshot, resume, with all these theatre credits, and I'd drop it off to the girls at the front desk. And you could see they'd sort of say, thank you. And I'm sure they just slipped it straight in the bin. But I did start to, I paid to do these courses. I was doing a lot of training there, and I did come across a couple of casting directors, and it was really Adrian Stern, a great New York casting director, who saw me do something, and she then went and introduced me to a couple of different managers, and that's how I got my manager there, my representation.
Yeah, and I suppose Cassie, at that time you're based in New York. I suppose apart from family, Australia and the acting scene is the furthest thing away from your mind. Tell me, you applied for Home and Away when you were out in United States in New York. If my research is
No,
correct, is it?
no, actually, it's probably not clear, but no, I actually had moved back. So I'd moved
Okay.
back from overseas. I had a partner here I was dating. My boyfriend lived back in Sydney, so I moved back. And I was in Sydney for about a year, and then I got Home and Away.
And in terms of moving back to Sydney, and obviously the bright lights that is the TV show of Home and Away, it's like Fair City in Ireland. It's a national sort of religion and sort of stuff. In terms of obviously having that resume and work done in the United States, was it easy then when you come back to Australia to find the right representation to put you in to the proper circles to make you know of when these opportunities might come available, like in Home and Away? Because I imagine Home and Away, while it's a famous sort of show in Australia, if opportunities do come up, it's only in secluded channels that people become first aware of them.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I had to have representation. Before I moved to New York, when I was at university, I was doing dance jobs in Sydney when I was at uni, and I had a casting director in Sydney when I went in for a commercial to be a dancer, and he said, "Have you ever tried acting?" And he then introduced me to an acting agent, Nikki Galewis, who's my agent now, who's always been my agent, will always be my agent, I hope. And so when I came back from New York, and she got me the audition for Home and Away. You're right. It is I think Australia, like most places, I guess, it is difficult to get in these auditions. The biggest thing is to get the audition, to show them that what you can do. And then hopefully, somewhere along the track, there'll be the right role for you.
Yeah, and tell me about that audition in terms of preparation for it. Obviously, you've icons of the Australian acting industry like Ray Maher, Alf Stewart, other people that are synonymous household names in Australia. When you hear of a big show like Home and Away, in terms of that, there's almost like a month. I know you probably don't have a month's preparation for it. You probably have a week or 2 weeks max to prepare for it. So do you almost feel like there's so much, you divulge so much time and effort into that one audition? Or were you sort of tense? Were you anxious? Were you nervous about that audition? Did you feel it was make or break for you?
I was, yeah, absolutely. I think because as well, I'd been overseas and I'd done the show overseas, and I'd been back here for a year with no work. I really thought, when I got that audition, I really thought I've got to get this. So I worked really hard on it. And I did the first one, and then the second one that for the callback was like a week later. And again, I worked really hard on it. And the first one was okay. I sort of just went in and did my thing. And then the second one, I was opposite Charlie Clausen, who played Zach. So he came in to read with me. And I just remember I just didn't expect one of the actors from the show to be in the room reading with me. And I think I got really nervous, and I was shaking so much. I had to like pin my hands down next to my body so they couldn't see me shaking. And I don't even know how I stumbled through it, but I made a lot of mistakes. And I remember I was just so nervous, and I tried to just connect with him, but I was just so aware. And then I didn't hear for like 2 months. So I thought, oh, well, I didn't get it. It was a really long time before I actually heard that I'd gotten the role.
And I suppose, Cassie, that sort of first day walking up to Byron Bay to sort of to set the casting of Home and Away, walking where it sort of sets the meeting sort of famous icons that you would have probably seen on your TV screens growing up throughout the years. Was that sort of hit me sort of moment, sort of a smack sort of moment in terms of family, friends and loved ones, and sort of how was that first week on set of being a Home and Away actress? Was it almost a bit surreal? Was it almost like yourself, no, this is not, I'm gonna wake up sometime?
Yeah, no, it was really surreal. I think it just also felt like, so it shoots in Palm Beach, which is in Sydney,
Yeah.
and I think it also felt like such a full circle moment for me, because I'd gone to New York and I'd been there for so long and done, really tried to train and everything, but I always, I guess I just thought that I'd get work there and I'd stay there. So to come back home and get on a show that you used to watch when you were young,
Yeah.
it really felt like a full circle moment, and that all the training had been for this to come back and to be able to work in my hometown. And yeah, I loved it. I was obviously really nervous around it. They're so wonderful, especially the cast that's been there for a really long time. They're just so dialed in, and they're really good at their craft, and they know what they're doing. And so you kind of get on set, and obviously it's a bit intimidating, but they're also lovely that quickly fades away, and it starts to feel like a second home on set.
And tell me, with becoming a home and away actress and being a cast home away, obviously your name goes through the roof in terms of publicity. All of a sudden, you have people knowing who you are, being aware of having an interest in sort of your life and your activities. You've showbiz, paparazzi, photographers, all that sort of taking interest. Was that after when that sort of began to take off, being what is being a cast regular of Home and Away? What was that sort of like for you? Was that sort of like a sort of this comes with the territory of sort of making it, or was it almost like, wow, in terms of this is a bit of a big deal. I didn't expect all of this.
uh it takes you by surprise if you see someone trying to take your photo. But I really think that happened at the start. Look, I lived with 5 friends in a share house when I was on Home and Away, 5 girls, and good friends with all of them. And I think after a while, I mean, I just lived such a normal life. I think it was also quite boring for the paparazzi. So at the
Yeah.
start, they would try to follow me sometimes. Like, I'd notice, and my friends would be in the car and they're like, what's going on? Because my friends weren't in the entertainment industry either. So it was just kind of hilarious to us. And then I think they cottoned on after about 6 months that really I'm not that interesting. And so they just kind of dropped off. So it hasn't really been an issue. It still takes me back if somebody recognizes me or something. Sometimes uh, I'll sort of go, oh, that's right. Like, you just forget that your face is on TV sometimes, or you've done a movie or something. You just forget, I guess. And so it does sometimes take you back, but it's always nice when people are fans of the show or some work you've done. It's always really nice.
And what's it like, Cassie, when you all of a sudden, as people that get on Home and Away as well, they always have these sort of magazines and tabloids looking for photo shoots and maybe pictures of the male cast and the female cast on beaches, on swimsuits, all this sort of stuff, the whole Home and Away vibe going. Was that as
Mm.
coming into it as in maybe not a young actress, but in someone in your 20s in Home and Away? Was that a bit nerve-wracking, or was that a bit exciting? Because some of the young actors, they grow up and they're sort of used to that sort of, they just see it as
Mm.
part of the job. How was that for you in terms of people maybe wanting to shoot photo shoots and beaches and sort of stuff like that, and swimsuits and all that sort of stuff that comes with Home and Away in the past and cast, and it's not only for the girls but it's for the guys as well, it seems to me.
Yeah. Look, I grew up, so the farm I grew up in is on the coast. It's like 5 minutes from the beach. So I grew up on the beach, and I'm in the ocean all the time most days. So I'm quite comfortable and used to being in a swimming costume. That said, it's very confronting to open up a magazine or something and see your body. And also, I've always had because I've tried to stay physically fit, and especially then I just come off the back of dancing quite a bit. So I was quite confident, and then I was quite confident in my body, and I just didn't really have problems because I always just saw it as like it was strong. I was strong then. And then I looked at pictures of myself and I was like, oh God, like they get you from an angle that you didn't expect, or, you know, and then, so it's easy to focus on those things and to start to get a bit paranoid about it. But you just can't. I'm really lucky in the way that I have a really grounded family and friends, that would never let me kind of go down that path. And I don't think I did. And also on the show, they didn't encourage that. Like, you know, when I was on the show, they were very like body positive, and I found they were anyway. And I just, yeah, it's just a weird thing, and you kind of have to get your head around it. And then sometimes you might just stop looking at those things. You might just stop looking at the photos of yourself in swimwear, because you know it's not, maybe not great for yourself. And somebody else might look at it and think there's nothing wrong with that picture. But of course, if it's of you, you're going to see all the faults in it.
Yeah. And I suppose, Cassie, in terms of the big storyline with you now, because I want to wrap up the sort of home and away talk fairly quick and talk about other aspects of your career. But obviously, the bus scene, the paralysing sort of scene, the sort of major sort of one of the first sort of major sort of storylines with you. And I read somewhere the research that you went in terms of that sort of storyline you put into that you wanted to play it homage to the people. You didn't want it to be disrespectful. You didn't want it to sort of mimic what sort of real life sort of difficulties that would be. Did you actually go and visit people that had been in sort of similar accidents, or go to hospitals or wards, or how did you sort of visually prepare yourself for acting something that would be outside your comfort zone, I imagine?
Yeah, there were a couple of things that happened on the show. So one was that I lost the use of my legs, and for that I did more online research. We had a fantastic nurse, Wendy, who worked on the set with us, and for the other, I also had a breast cancer storyline, and she actually took me to a hospital to show me things. She really talked me through it. I did a lot of research on that as well, because both of those kind of storylines, you just feel a weight of responsibility that you want to do it correctly. It's obviously up to the writers how the story's written, but it's up to you as the performer to bring the most truth to that story. So to what I could control, I would research really hard, because I just I never wanted to receive a message, or oh, it's nothing like that, or oh gosh, you played it totally wrong. You know, I would hate to receive something like that. I'd hate to misrepresent anybody who's been going through something like that. You can never get it quite right, I guess, because everybody's experience is different. But for me, I always want to research as heavily as I can and go in as well prepared, just to show the truth of what somebody would be going through in that situation, as much as I can.
Yeah. And Cassie, in terms of your own sort of death scene and demise from the show, in terms of how was it like? Was that on the cards for a while? Was it a mutual understanding that you would be leaving the sort of setup, or was it a surprise to you even when you saw the script and you were going to be found out, well, you were going to have this head injury after the explosion at Caravan Park, and you'd seem fine at first and then you'd die later? Or how was that all sort of conveyed to you? And was it the way? Were you okay with your own sort of death scene?
Yeah, I mean, it's always like when you've been playing a character for almost 3 years, it's obviously you're quite attached to them. So it was like when they told me what was going to happen, I obviously was a bit like, oh gosh, but I did know my contract was coming, you know, my 3-year contract was coming to an end. So I did know there was going to be some kind of exit plan. I just didn't know exactly what it was going to be. And so I was actually quite happy to go out with a bang, because I didn't really want to just go off into the sunset. Like I wanted something dramatic to happen, and they certainly delivered on that. But I just remember when we were filming it, I was filming, I think, my death scene, my actual scene where I die, and Kyle Pryor, Dr. Nate, was trying to revive me on the table. I know the director had to just yell cut, and he was like, Cass, like, corpses don't cry, because I'm sitting there like bawling my eyes out because my character was dying, and he's like, you can't do that, corpses don't cry. So then we had to redo it, and I had to be like, okay, pull it together, Cassie, just because it felt so like such a closure for my character, which was upsetting and bittersweet. But also, no, I was actually fine with the way my character went out. I thought it was quite a good storyline, although it was really upsetting. I was more upset than my nephew died as well.
Yeah. And I suppose, Cassie, that first week,
Nephew in the show. So
Cassie,
yeah.
that first week, that you're no longer a home and away actress, and you would have been going to that sort of set 5 days a week, maybe long hours, 12, 13 hour shoots someday, and all of a sudden for the first week or two, was it almost sort of a honeymoon sort of period where you didn't start thinking about it, or did it dawn with you after a week or two, said, yeah, do you often get up one morning and said, you got to Carney, I need to go to the set now, and then you realize, yeah, you're not actually going there anymore, you're off to a different sort of, was it weird not seeing the familiar faces on a daily basis that you'd saw on for 3 years?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you always miss, because what makes, like any job across any industry, a lot of it is the people make the job. And we had a fantastic group on there when I was on set. So, of course, I missed working with them. But at the same time, I had been doing the show for 3 years, or almost 3 years. So I was ready to move on to something else. So I think there was a little bit of, like, nervousness that you're back out there in the wilderness of acting where you don't know when the next job's coming. But at the same time, I was excited.
Yeah.
And not soon after that, I moved across to I actually moved to California. So I was excited about that new chapter. I think I was just ready for something else.
Yeah. And do you think moving back to the States, was that for you and your partner at the time, was that a sort of a difficult sort of decision, or a natural sort of progression? Because you had come back from America once, you had probably settled into life in Australia after 4 years of States. All of a sudden now you're going back there again. Was it very much upheaval again in terms of that? Was there a mutual understanding that this was best for you and your family?
Well, I think because I've been back in Australia for 4 years, I'm a bit of a, I mean, now not so much, but when I was younger, I was definitely loved traveling. And so to me, I was just excited. I was on my own then. And so I was
Yeah.
just excited to go travel again and live in another city. I would have gone to London. I would have, it just so happened, because I had the visa for the States, I thought I'd go there, and I ended up just kind of staying a little while. But yeah, I just wanted to go out on another adventure. I think I was just ready to, it didn't feel like such an upheaval. Also, it's quite, I'd lived there before, so it wasn't such a big deal as I think the first time I went over. But if I was to do it now, I think it would feel like more of a big deal. But at the time, I was just ready. I just wanted to go away again.
And was it a natural decision this for you? Obviously, coming back off 3 years of done at home, where was it very easy for you, decision for you to, with the context you'd built up in the industry now, to say, right, we're heading to the West Coast, we're heading to Hollywood, we're heading to LA, where most 99% of the work is in terms of the United States. Was that an easy decision for you to head there this time rather than New York?
Well, I had some reps contact me in
Oh,
Sydney when my contract was coming up on Home and Away, a management company, and so they asked if I would go to Los Angeles, and that's originally why I went. Yeah.
okay. And in terms of arriving in Los Angeles, did the opportunities come sort of thick and fast for you at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just join the rest of them over there, where you just start to go out on auditions. And I was lucky, I got some auditions. Yeah, you just start to you join all the other hundreds and thousands of actors.
Yeah. And I suppose, Cassie, in some of those roles, we don't have to. I know Two Graves in the Desert was one of them that you sort of played out there. Other sort of action movies and sort of stuff like that. Was that thrilling for you to get into maybe the action, the horror, the sci-fi genre, other sort of different genres, rather than being a drama actress, which you had been for the last 3 years, to get involved in projects and movies that would open you up to all different types of different genres of acting?
Yeah, like I'd love to do more. I mean, the two films that I did when I was over there were both